One of your invention in your philosophy is moral fact, right? I found a moral fact regarding the existence of ancestors. For some reason, I like cemeteries, so when I go to some other countries, I often visit the cemetery graveyards. Basically speaking, pragmatically, a cemetery is a useless space with nothing but rows of stones, right? However, regardless of religion, ethnicity, or culture, when people go to a cemetery, they feel the presence of the dead and behave with respect and care, just as we experienced in this afternoon, right? So when you think about it, this is a wonderful moral fact, right? And the question, how can we be good ancestors, has, of course, could have many different answers to it, but I have never met anyone who doesn't understand the meaning of this question itself, right? So I think there is something important about the moral fact of the existence of ancestors who are an invisible presence, but still that everyone can feel and share socially with others. It's incredible. What do you think about that?
Well, before I respond to this, and also, I've been thinking a lot about this question already, throughout the year, because when I was invited very kindly by many of my Japanese friends throughout this year to their homes and learning Japanese since December, then of course you learn how a Japanese home works, right? The vocabulary for the rooms and the practices of the rooms, and the importance of, if you go to someone's private home, you are relating to their ancestors, right? So part of the respect to the home has to do with the ancestors. And so it's an important explicit feature, a moral fact that is explicit in Japan and more implicit in Germany. But before I dig my heels a little deeper into that very important dimension, and I think that's a deep point that I want to follow through with you, just one thing that just came to my mind. I just had this as a vision as you were accounting for this, the role of cemeteries and how useless they were. My first thought when you said they were useless, like an ironic thought in my mind was, well, then every building is useless in that sense. It's just stone. And then I realized that all of Tokyo, seen from above, is a Buddhist graveyard.
Yes.
That's the architecture. So, you have all seen it from various rooftops, right? So why does Tokyo have so many rooftop bars, right? Why is everything, compared to New York, for instance, where you have few rooftop bars. So you don't get these various views. And if you're up there, it's it looks exactly like that.
Yeah.
So the graveyard, the cemetery that we attended today in Roppongi, right? Also it has a little hill, right? It's on the Roppongi Hill, is a small version of Roppongi Hill.
Yeah.
Right? In literary studies, this is called a synecdoche. There's if the whole is a part of itself, right? So, and the structure repeats itself. So in that respect, any apartment in Tokyo, right, is an ancestor, right? So you live in the ancestor. That is why this architecture works so well.
Yeah, so we should put more rooftop bar on top of the graves.
Yes, exactly. You should have more rooftop bars on top of graves. It's the next step. So ancestry, right, I think indeed is a universal moral fact, as you point out, It matters across all cultures. And if you have an unhealthy relationship to your ancestors, then you lead a bad life. That's why, basic psychology and psychoanalysis is about repairing your relationship to your ancestors. And living with family members is basically always about the preparation of ancestry. Parents want to become good ancestors to their children, right? While one is alive. It is part of the experience of parents to think of what it means when they're dead, right? So you want to be a good ancestor. The first thing which I realized when I had my first child was that it matters. The only reason why my life mattered now was because of her life. That doesn't mean that my life lost its meaning, right? I'm still around, right? But if I die, it's bad now, right? It wasn't bad before, then I die, whatever. I'm here and then I'm gone. But the reason why it's bad that I die now, right, is that it might be bad for her. So my life became a meaning that I didn't plan, right? So I didn't want to have children in order for my life to have that meaning, right? This was a surprise, like, whoa, what's that feature? And it occurred to me in Rio de Janeiro, which is a very dangerous place, right? I thought that, is it responsible for me to continue traveling to Rio de Janeiro, risking my life, right? So, and now and then of course you think, what is it to become a good ancestor? And I fully agree with you that, and this is something where I think all of us can also learn something from Japan. Because the role of ancestors in your social lives is much more explicit. It is present, we have this, of course, also in Germany, right? But it's a very different relationship. It's much less part of everyday life than it is in Japan. You live much closer to your ancestors than we do.
So, but still, you have a relationship in an implicit way, right?
Yes, it's much more implicit, right? So it binds families together, right? The memorials, all of this. Of course, we have practices to relate to ancestors and to generate intergenerational justice, right? All issues of climate change and the economy are ultimately questions of good ancestry. That's why this notion is playing an ever bigger role now. What is it to become a good ancestor is becoming a more important question in the context of intergenerational justice. And a lot of the ecological movement has a Buddhist origin. The Buddha was the first, long before the German thinker Hans Jonas, who made this popular in Germany after the war. The Buddha was the first to realize that everything over which we have power is something towards which we have moral obligations. Non-human life and rivers included. So being in a relationship of power to something is responsibility. And that's and for this reason we are in a relationship of power towards those who do not yet even exist. And that was the origin for Hans Jonas, who didn't know, I think, that there was a Buddhist ancestor to this, right? So the entire ecological movement has the Buddha as their ancestor.
Yes. Yeah, so regarding ancestor, do you know what the main job of a Buddhist priest in Japan? Many foreigners think it should be a mindful teacher teaching the meditation or something. But actually, the most important role is now, as now you see, to perform funerals, ritual ceremonies, and memorial services for the dead. At first glance, it seems to be retrospective, but I think it is actually a job, role, which is open to the future. This is because we have inherited so much from our ancestors, and sometimes we hold on to it too tightly. So we fail to make the transition, and we cannot move forward into the future sometimes. So I think the role of religious people is to help people move forward by offering memorial services for those who have completed their role. We punctuate life and society and move forward. For example, yes, so you might have discussed on the GDP index. Maybe GDP index is approaching its funeral time, right? So thank you, GDP, for everything so far. The goodbye and rest in peace, sort of. So yeah, we are in this Tsukiji Honganji, where so the monks have funeral ceremonies. What do you think we should be holding a funeral for today? What do you want to leave here to be a good ancestor for the future generation?
Well, I really like this. So we are in a time of transition, and that is very clear. And the transition has two dimensions. It's a transition in our life form, so it's fully biological, and it is a transition in our mode of producing surplus value. It's the economy. Life and the economy are transitioning into a new form. And this transition, so here's something that I would like to leave behind, GDP included. I'll say something about this. I really like that thought, right, of also honoring GDP. Leaving things behind. There's a difference between leaving something behind well and a revolution. A revolution is not leaving things behind well.
Right.
The paradigm of a bad relationship to ancestors is the Maoist cultural revolution. That's the paradigm of a bad relationship, right? The cultural revolution, we must never forget that, is one of the worst events of the 20th century. It has the ranks of the big genocides and so forth. It's one of the biggest disasters of humanity. And why? Because it doesn't understand that the new, right, can only work if it respects the old. That doesn't mean that it repeats the old. It is the new, right? But the new is only healthy and stable and sustainable if it finds a place for the old as an ancestor.
Right.
And remarkably, I made a version of this point to an audience where I thought that, this will be strange now. Introduced, this was in a state of Germany called Niedersachsen, which is the home to Volkswagen, the car company. And this matters a lot, and it was the opening speech for the meeting of all German foundations. And the governor of the state was also there in the audience. And there I said, and they asked me, indeed, now that you mention it, I didn't even put this together precisely, right? Don't we need a new memory culture, right? It was about memorials. And there I said, we need to leave behind the idea of a transformation of society, which is very prominent right now. People talk a lot about change and transformation. These are big words in the political landscape. And then I said, how about we translate the word transformation into Greek, and now it will sound very different. It's the same word, but just in Greek. And in Greek, it is metamorphosis. Transformation in Greek is metamorphosis. It's the same word. So the Romans translated metamorphosis as transformation. Same thought. But you see, if I say metamorphosis, I say something entirely different. I think of butterfly, right? I don't think of technological instruments. If I say transformation, it sounds like industrial revolution.
Right.
So in short, I think what would deserve a burial is the industrial revolution. Because, we are beyond that. And so what we need to learn is how to integrate, right, how to thank the Industrial Revolution for what it gave us, right, and then move forward. But moving forward is not ending industry, right? It's not ending capitalism and starting a revolution. It is having learned something and now transforming the same animal into a different animal, right? And that's a different attitude. So that is what I would like to have a broad service for, the Industrial Revolution. That is something that, we should, with gratitude, say goodbye to.
Thank you for sharing your profound thought around the funeral you want to have for. Yeah. All right. So it's almost the time, and I'd love to listen to your about your upcoming book, already published in German, but so the latest one.
There are so many. So the one we spoke about, the human animal. Yeah. So we had a really good conversation about this. So one book will be out in English translation soon, and there will be a Japanese translation as well. The human animal. And we had a great conversation about this because Shokei Sensei sent me an email making a point that also plays an important role in that book. And then we continued that conversation behind the scene. So let me summarize this. And because this book is my metamorphosis, my own metamorphosis. My most recent thinking on economic issues and all of this is basically coming from that book. So here's the thought. So we tend to think of humans, all of us, all traditions, as animals plus something else, right? So rational animals, for instance, we might say we are rational animals, or moral animals, or animals with language, right? Animals with religion, whatever. Right. Animals plus something. Now think about the following. If human equals, very simple equation, human equals animal plus X something, right? Then an animal is a human minus X, right? But that can't be true because then all animals would be the same, just animals, right? But that's not true. Bees are very different from lions. Together they are different from dolphins and so forth, right? So it's not like there's just one big animal. There are all these. So the next step in the thought then is, okay, so the other animals are also animals plus something. So human is animal plus X, bee is animal plus Y, lion is animal plus Z, and so forth, right? Okay, fine. But then what is an animal? And then you see suddenly you have no answer. So the definition, the self-definition of humans, right, leads to the realization that the concept of an animal has absolutely no meaning. And then I went to the zoologists, right? And it's like, okay, someone must know this. So I asked the people who work on animals, right? So I consulted many different life sciences, and I went to the zoology departments like, look, I have this problem. I have absolutely no idea, right? This is all completely nonsense, right? So please enlighten me, what is an animal? And then they said, oh, we stopped talking about this a long time ago, right, animals. So there aren't any animals in zoology. But here's what we now have as a notion. And now things get even funnier. They call this a metazoon, right, which is a meta-animal, just in Greek, metazoon. And here, this is, instead of animal, this is what they use. The philosopher Peter Godfrey Smith just also wrote a book about this by coincidence. And so metazoon is, here's the definition, a multicellular organism which consumes multicellular organisms. But by that definition, a plant is an animal. So now it gets worse, because now we don't know what plants are either, right? And so the consequence that I draw in the book is to say, the only animal that there is us, right? Because we defined ourselves as animals. But when we try to say what that means, we just speak nonsense. So maybe, right, to go back to and then conclude my part maybe of this conversation, to an interesting earlier meeting of a German philosopher and a Buddhist monk. There's this YouTube video, you can see this, where Martin Heidegger meets a Buddhist monk. And Heidegger tries to explain to the Buddhist monk that in the West we draw a distinction, he says, between humans, animals, plants, and mountains. And he claims that the Buddhist does not draw that distinction, and the Buddhist just smiles. And I think maybe today we moved way beyond that.
Yeah. So this is the next version of the dialogue between the Western philosopher and monk, maybe. Yeah, that's a great conclusion, maybe. So there is no conclusion for this conversation. There is no end. So let's continue our dialogue to finding the new realism together, all of us. Thank you for taking part in this recording of this podcast voice today, Professor Markus Gabriel. So please give big applause to him. And thank you so much for everyone, also for everyone who came along in this tough but weather. And so I'm sorry running out of the time, so this session doesn't have any Q&A part. I'm sorry. So let me stop at this point. Thank you so much.
どうもありがとうございました。